The night was cold, the kind of biting chill that carried not only through the bones but deep into the mind. Detective Pierce had never expected to find himself in China, let alone standing in the shadow of the Great Wall. What was meant to be a journey of rest and reflection had turned into something far darker. He had been invited by an old historian, Professor Liang, who insisted that strange disappearances had been occurring near a forgotten section of the wall. The locals whispered about spirits, about the unrest of ancient soldiers, but Pierce knew well enough that whispers often hid darker truths. As he stood at the base of the crumbling stones, lantern in hand, he took a slow breath. The wall stretched endlessly in both directions, snaking across mountains like the spine of a slumbering beast. But the section before him was abandoned, overgrown with weeds and wrapped in shadows. Detective Pierce. Liang's voice broke the silence, soft but trembling. Thank you for coming. I wouldn't have called you if it wasn't serious. People vanish here. Tourists, guards, even villagers who dared to pass by at night. Their bodies are never found. Only... He hesitated, his eyes flicking toward the stones. Only their voices. Pierce narrowed his eyes. Voices? Liang nodded slowly. At night, if you listen closely, the wall speaks. Cries, screams, whispers in old dialects long forgotten. Some claim it is the souls of the workers who died during construction. Others say something darker was buried within the stones themselves. Pierce had heard enough of folklore in his career to know one thing: legends were often born from something real. The two men climbed the uneven steps, the lantern's glow throwing wild shadows against the cracked stonework. The silence of the mountains was suffocating, broken only by the occasional rustle of the wind through dead grass. Yet the higher they climbed, the more Pierce felt it, an oppressive weight in the air, as though unseen eyes were watching. At the top, they reached a half-collapsed watchtower. Its roof was gone, the walls leaning like a drunk staggering toward collapse. Pierce stepped inside, boots crunching against broken tiles. His flashlight beam cut across the walls, and he froze. Scratches. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Deep gouges carved into the stone, as though someone, or something, had clawed desperately to get out. This wasn't made recently, Liang whispered, fear dripping from every word. Look closer. Pierce did. The marks weren't new, they were ancient, smooth at the edges by time, yet still carrying the raw violence of whatever hand had made them. He crouched, tracing a finger across the grooves. Something in his gut twisted. These weren't the marks of tools. They looked like fingernails. And then he heard it. A whisper. So faint he almost thought it was the wind. But it grew, curling around him like smoke, words he couldn't understand but could feel, echoing from within the stone. Liang gripped his arm. Do you hear it? Please tell me you hear it. Pierce's jaw tightened. He had heard voices before, victims in the dark, confessions, cries for help. But this was different. This was layered, countless voices all at once, moaning in agony. We're not alone, he muttered. Before Liang could reply, something scraped across the far wall of the tower. Pierce swung the flashlight toward the sound, and the beam landed on a shape. For the briefest moment, it looked like a soldier in rusted armor, face hollow, eyes burning faintly white. And then it was gone. Liang stumbled backward, nearly dropping the lantern. They're real. Pierce steadied his breath. He had seen many horrors, but this was the first time he truly felt the weight of centuries pressing against him. He wasn't just chasing a murderer or unmasking a fraud. Whatever was happening here was older, deeper. The historian's voice shook. Detective, what do we do? Pierce adjusted his coat, the flicker of the lantern catching the grim determination in his eyes. We find the truth. Whatever's hidden in these stones, I'll uncover it. But if the wall is holding something back, he glanced at the deep scratches again, then we may have just opened the door. The wind rose suddenly, howling through the tower like a scream, carrying with it a chorus of whispers. And as the lantern light trembled, Pierce knew the night had only just begun. The lantern's glow flickered violently, shadows stretching unnaturally across the cracked stones. For a moment, Detective Pierce thought the darkness itself had shifted, as though the wall was alive, inhaling and exhaling around them. He had learned to read silence, to notice the faintest change in air, in sound. And right now, the silence of this place felt heavier than death itself. Liang's hands trembled as he clutched the lantern. "Detective, we shouldn't be here. The villagers, they warned me. They said if you stay past midnight the wall, it swallows you." Pierce's eyes didn't leave the scratches carved into the tower walls. Warnings exist for a reason. Either to keep people safe, he pressed his hand against the cold stone, or to keep secrets buried. The historian swallowed hard, his gaze darting around the darkness. "You think someone did this? That these stories are not just ghosts?" Pierce straightened, pulling a small notebook from his coat pocket. "Every legend I've chased had a core of truth. Someone carved these marks. Someone, or something. And I intend to find out what." They descended deeper into the ruined watchtower, reaching the base where collapsed stones had given way to an old stairwell, half buried beneath earth and roots. The air down there was different, wet, stagnant, carrying the faint scent of decay. Pierce clicked his flashlight on again, its beam revealing an archway sealed by heavy stones. On the largest slab, faded Chinese characters had been painted in crimson. The color had dulled over centuries, but the message was still clear. Liang leaned close, his face pale. "It says, 'Do not disturb the sleepers. They guard the sins of the past.'" Pierce's jaw tightened. He'd seen warnings like this before. They never stopped anyone determined to uncover the truth. With effort, they shifted the loose stones until a gap appeared wide enough for them to squeeze through. Dust poured down as if the wall itself resisted their intrusion. Inside, the passage stretched into pitch black, narrow and suffocating. The moment Pierce stepped through, the temperature dropped sharply. The walls were slick with moisture, the floor uneven and littered with fragments of bone-white stone. Or perhaps, not stone at all. He crouched, lifting a shard under the flashlight. Liang gasped. That's a human jaw." Pierce let it drop. "The wall is built on bodies." The corridor twisted and turned, the air pressing heavier with every step. Whispers slid along the stones, words in ancient tongues Pierce couldn't decipher yet felt deep inside his chest. The further they went, the clearer the whispers became, pleas, curses, prayers, all overlapping in an endless chorus. Then, the tunnel opened into a chamber. It was vast, hidden beneath the wall for centuries. At its center stood a mound of skeletons, piled high as if dumped in haste. Some wore fragments of rusted armor, others simple cloth. But all of them faced outward, jaws open in eternal screams. On the walls around the chamber, strange murals had been carved. They depicted scenes of men chained, of soldiers burying the living into the foundation of the wall. At the final panel, a figure emerged, something not human, its body towering and twisted, with countless arms stretching from its sides. The soldiers bowed to it, offering prisoners as sacrifice. Liang stumbled backward. This isn't history. This is blasphemy." Pierce studied the carvings closely. "Maybe it's both." Suddenly, a sound rose from the pile of bones. Not the crack of shifting weight, but a low, guttural moan. Bones rattled, sliding against each other as the mound trembled. From between the skeletal remains, a hand shot upward. Skinless, blackened by time, yet moving. Liang dropped the lantern, its light spilling wildly across the chamber. It's waking! The voices grew deafening now, filling the chamber with a storm of screams and whispers. Pierce gritted his teeth, pulling Liang back. His mind raced. If the wall was more than stone, if it was a prison, then breaking inside had weakened it. The mound shifted again, bones cascading down as something immense stirred beneath. Pierce caught only glimpses in the chaos, an eye glowing faintly like dying embers, a jaw filled with teeth too sharp, too many, and limbs that seemed to bend in impossible directions. The historian was nearly paralyzed with terror. "Detective, we need to run, now!" But Pierce's voice was calm, cold, unwavering. "Not yet. I need to know what it is." He raised the flashlight higher, the beam falling on the carved mural once more. The figure with countless arms. The sacrifices. The words Liang had translated, they guard the sins of the past. He understood. They didn't build the wall to keep enemies out. Pierce muttered, his voice barely audible over the rising cacophony. They built it to keep this in. And then the chamber shook, dust raining from above as the mound erupted. The chamber convulsed as if the earth itself had a heartbeat. Bones clattered violently, cascading down the mound in an avalanche of death. The lantern lay shattered, its flames snuffed out, leaving only Pierce's flashlight to cut through the black. The historian screamed, clutching the detective's arm. "Pierce, we need to go, now!" But Pierce's gaze remained locked on the shifting mound. Something was clawing its way free. The air turned suffocating, each breath heavier, as though the chamber itself rejected their presence. A shape emerged. First a head, massive, skull-like, but wrong. Its surface rippled as though stretched skin barely contained what festered beneath. Then shoulders, then arms. Not 2, not 4, but dozens, skeletal and sinewy, unfurling from the mass of bones like spider legs. It stood, towering, impossible, an amalgamation of every corpse buried beneath the wall. Its body writhed, faces pressing against its surface, mouths opening in silent screams before sinking back into the shifting flesh. Liang fell to his knees, whispering prayers in broken Chinese. "This is not real. It cannot be real." Pierce raised his flashlight higher, steady despite the terror pressing against his mind. He had faced killers, he had faced liars, but this was history's nightmare given form. The entity's voice filled the chamber, not through sound, but through thought. Thousands of whispers spoke at once inside their heads. "We were promised release. You broke the seal. You are ours." The walls trembled, dust raining from above. The murals seemed to writhe in the flashlight's beam, the carved figures shifting, bowing, bleeding. Pierce forced his voice steady. "Who bound you here?" The whispers hissed. "The emperors, the builders, they fed us, they feared us, they used us." Liang sobbed, covering his ears. "Detective, please, we cannot fight this." But Pierce's mind sharpened. He had studied human evil long enough to recognize the pattern. The wall was not only defense, but containment. An empire had struck a bargain with something beyond comprehension, feeding it lives to keep it imprisoned, buried beneath stone and time. And now, because of him, because they had broken the seal, the prison was weakening. The creature's limbs shot outward, bones snapping like whips. One slammed into the chamber wall, stone exploding in shards. Another reached for them. Pierce grabbed Liang, yanking him aside just as the skeletal arms smashed the ground where they had stood. The flashlight flickered. Darkness surged forward. Pierce's thoughts raced. This thing wasn't fully free yet. It still clung to the bones, the chamber, the weight of centuries holding it down. That meant there was still a chance. He spotted a half-buried urn near the mural, its surface cracked but covered in the same crimson script as the warning outside. Ancient sealing vessels. Pierce's instinct screamed. This wasn't just archaeology, it was ritual. Liang! He barked, shaking the terrified man. The urn, read it. Tell me what it says. Liang stammered, eyes wide. It says, to bind the hunger, blood must answer blood. The creature roared, a sound like stone grinding against stone, shaking the chamber. Limbs lashed blindly, tearing through the skeleton mound, scattering centuries of history into the dark. Pierce didn't hesitate. He drew a small knife from his coat, a tool he carried more for practicality than defense. He slashed his palm, crimson dripping onto the cracked urn. The ground responded instantly. The air howled, pulling at the blood as though the chamber itself drank it. The urn glowed faintly, the crimson script flaring like fire. The entity shrieked, limbs thrashing wildly. The faces across its body howled in unison, an army of tormented souls. The chamber walls groaned as fissures split upward, dust and rock raining down. Liang clung to him, horrified. It's working! It's binding it again! But Pierce's eyes narrowed. The creature was fighting back, stronger than before, desperate not to return to its prison. It lunged, dozens of limbs converging on them. Pierce shoved Liang aside, raising the flashlight with his bleeding hand. For an instant, the beam cut across the monster's shifting form, illuminating not just horror, but truth. He saw it. The chains. Faint, spectral bindings etched into the very stones of the wall, glowing faintly in the light. They weren't broken, just weakened. Liang! Pierce shouted over the deafening chaos. The wall itself is the seal. We don't need to destroy it, we need to strengthen it. The historian's eyes lit with desperate understanding. He pressed his bleeding hand against the stone mural, smearing crimson across the carvings. The symbols flared to life, the whole chamber shaking as ancient power surged. The entity screamed, 1,000 voices howling in agony as its limbs convulsed. Bones shattered, skulls cracked, the mass of writhing flesh collapsing inward. The chamber began to collapse. Stones rained from above, the earth groaning as if eager to bury its prisoner again. Pierce grabbed Liang, pulling him toward the stairwell. They ran, stumbling over bones and rubble as the chamber crumbled behind them. The whispers followed, furious, desperate. We will not sleep forever. We will wait, and when the wall falls, we rise. They burst back into the night air, gasping, coughing, just as the stairwell caved in, sealing the passage with tons of stone and dust. The great wall stood silent once more. Pierce wiped the blood from his hand, staring back at the ruined tower. His jaw tightened. History always hides its ugliest truths. Tonight we saw one. Liang trembled beside him, whispering, Detective, what if the wall ever breaks? Pierce lit a cigarette with steady hands, eyes fixed on the endless shadow of the wall stretching into darkness. Then humanity won't need a detective, he said quietly. It'll need a gravekeeper. And with that, the night swallowed them both, leaving the wall to breathe in silence once again.